dachte, Corona geht weg, aber das bleibt noch.
Für mich ist das schon eine halbe Ewigkeit mit dem Corona.
Alle meine Masken finde ich toll, weil die Masken schützen vielleicht manche vor Corona. Ich habe Angst vor Corona, weil Corona kann die Leute sterben lassen.
Meine Freunde sind ja doch nicht geimpft, also fürchte ich, dass sie Corona bekommen können.
Vor Corona war ganz viel anders, dass man sich mit seinen Freunden treffen kann, mehr zusammen sein konnten, dass man nicht die Masken tragen musste.
Wir wollten zu Silvester zu der Familie meiner Mutter, die in der Schweiz lebt, aber das können wir wahrscheinlich nicht, weil Schweiz zum Hochrisikogebiet erklärt wurde.
Eine von meinen Omas, die wohnt in Amerika und sie war 2 Jahre nicht mehr hier. Ich würde mich gerne impfen lassen. Einen Tag nach der Impfung geht es ihnen ein bisschen schlecht. Sonst ist alles eigentlich normal, glaube ich. Das dauert nur eine Sekunde, bis man fertig ist.
Meine Eltern haben sich informiert, dann haben sie sich geimpft, dann habe ich mich einfach auch geimpft.
Ich wünsche mir, dass Corona weg ist. Dass Corona weggeht und dass ich meine Oma wieder sehe.
Ich würde mir wünschen, dass mehr Leute geimpft sind und ich verstehe halt auch, warum man die Maske über die Nase haben will.
Es kann ja nicht für immer ja Corona geben. Ich will ihn wegschießen.
Life with the coronavirus must go on, but how? We visit a family in Chile, a country where over 90% of the population have been double vaccinated. And since December, children from the age of 3 have also been getting the jab. Plus, an interview with epidemiologist Tobias Kurth. What lies ahead for 2022? What developments are we likely to see this coming year? The Omicron variant is spreading rapidly across Europe. Infection rates are increasing at an unprecedented pace. But you might not know that, looking at the streets of downtown Berlin, to the dismay of some locals.
Unless they manage to get more people vaccinated, the numbers will go up.
Paramedics employed by the city's emergency services are already under strain.
During the very first lockdown, we set up a crisis team to put together a pandemic plan. We also have the option of the local volunteer emergency teams. And we have concepts for dealing with higher infection rates within the department.
More than 80% of his colleagues across the city have been vaccinated, but they still take extra precautions.
Anyone entering an official department building does a self-test.
The idea of getting away from it all is tempting. But whatever destination you choose, there's no escaping the coronavirus, especially now as Omicron spreads across the globe. We met people who decided to board a plane anyway, while the tourism and aviation industries struggle to recover from the pandemic.
400.
A jumbo jet is approaching the tarmac at Palma de Mallorca Airport.
50.
After months of lockdowns and travel restrictions, German tourists are again flocking to the Spanish island. Demand is huge for getaways in the sun. People are tired of the pandemic and eager for a change of scenery. For Felix Ebbinger, that means hope is on the horizon after a year and a half on a reduced hours furlough scheme. As the pandemic curtailed commercial air traffic, many planes and pilots were grounded.
Because of COVID, I spent 15 months on furlough and off work. That's a long time, the longest I've ever been away from flying. So it's a very special feeling to be back on board and back in a plane.
So, full speed ahead then? Far from it. Omicron has brought a bumpy landing for passengers and airlines alike. Fears surrounding the more infectious new variant prompted a range of countries to tighten their entry restrictions again practically overnight. Tens of thousands of flights were cancelled over the holiday season worldwide. Here at the airport in Berlin, feelings are also mixed. These passengers are checking in for a flight to Tenerife, where visitors are looking forward to sun and spring-like temperatures and rapidly rising infection rates due to the Omicron variant.
If I'd known what would happen, I probably wouldn't have booked this trip. It's still going to be nice, and we just needed the break. If we'd known this in October, we would never have booked this trip.
A sobering development for the airlines, still just recovering from the original slump. And for the pilots and flight attendants, too. At the start of the pandemic, Germany's biggest carrier, Lufthansa, had to be rescued by a €9 billion government bailout. Industry experts are now concerned that Omicron could put a damper on the rebound the sector had seen over the past months.
If we don't get this situation under control quickly, the industry is looking at additional losses in the billions. The airlines would have to massively reduce capacity and continue to try to sit things out. And companies that can't stay afloat under those conditions might need another round of government aid.
The renewed uncertainty is also affecting holidaymakers on the ground. Take Thailand, a favorite destination for many Europeans in winter. In November, it eased travel restrictions for visitors. But now the rules have been tightened again. Tourists are again required to provide documentation, including COVID tests and vaccination certificates. The pandemic has been an enormous challenge for German hotel owner Hayo von Keller. He runs an Ayurveda retreat on the island of Phuket.
To be honest, it's still too complicated. Most people aren't even aware of what's actually required when they book. They only find that out later on.
For hotels, that often means customers cancel their bookings or delay their travel plans. The entire sector, from hotels to airlines and travel agents, is feeling the effects. Lufthansa pilot Felix Ebbinger still hopes that the aviation industry will get back on an even keel soon. In the meantime, he's continuing his sessions in a flight simulator to maintain his skills.
1,000.
When will things go back to normal, if ever? A question people around the world are wondering about. What do epidemiologists reckon? We asked Tobias Kurth from Berlin's Charité University Hospital.
Hello, Mr. Kurth. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
We've been living with the pandemic for 2 years now. At first I thought we'd just have to be patient for a few weeks and then it would be over. Did you feel the same way? Or did you expect the pandemic to last for months or even years?
No, I didn't expect it to last this long either. Normally, you can stop a virus from transmitting by isolating infected individuals in the population, and that's what we did. But the trajectory this took was something that was very difficult to predict at the start. So the way things developed did surprise all of us, including me, of course.
Have we learned anything over the past 2 years? Which strategies were successful and what would you do differently in the future?
We've learned a lot and continue to learn more every day. It's important for us to realize that we're facing a global public health crisis. The virus doesn't respect borders. You cannot completely isolate it. Communication with the general public has to be clear and direct. That's something very important that we've learned. You can't just produce a vaccine in some corner of Europe and distribute it globally. Ideally, you have to find companies in each region to produce and distribute it locally. And once the situation improves, which it will at some point, we'll have to remember that.
When the first vaccines became available around a year ago, everyone felt pretty optimistic. But soon, new variants gave rise to new worries and concerns. What does science say about which vaccine protects you best against the new variants?
New data keeps coming in, and the situation will certainly continue to evolve. At the moment, it seems that the mRNA booster vaccines do lower the risk of developing severe disease, though they can't prevent it entirely. That applies to the Delta variant and, as the latest data suggests, also for the Omicron variant. So the vaccines do provide a kind of baseline protection, perhaps less than against the original strain or the Alpha variant, but they offer very good protection against severe disease. And after a booster, that seems to hold true for Omicron as well.
The way that the vaccines are being distributed globally is quite simply unfair. To what extent is this vaccine nationalism responsible for the fact that the pandemic is still ongoing?
That aspect does play a decisive role. If we were at the point of delivering boosters everywhere in the world, the risk of new variants emerging would be significantly lower. If we can't manage to comprehend and address the pandemic as a global challenge, it will continue to spread around the world. That's part of the problem.
What needs to happen so that we can look back at all this in a year's time and say, okay, the pandemic's over?
We have to take it seriously and be prepared to respond to an evolving situation. We need to be prepared for the likelihood that there will be new vaccines, which again should be made available to everyone. And it's vital that we fight this pandemic on a global level. That includes consequences not always directly linked to the virus, like mental health and the economic impact on certain parts of society. We have to consider the effects on children, the elderly, and other groups. We have to address their needs and those impacts too, and be proactive in addressing them, so that in a year or two we don't find ourselves facing a new situation involving long-term harms that are an indirect result of the virus.
Thank you, Mr. Kurth.
Tschüss. Tschüss, Frau Albrecht.
In some parts of Germany, children are returning to school despite rising infection rates. But in Chile, many parents have been homeschooling their children in hopes of protecting them from the coronavirus. That's why the country launched a major campaign to vaccinate children about a month ago.
Schools in Chile are currently on summer break, but pupils are due to return to classrooms by March at the latest. Before Christmas, Elisa and Matilda wrote a letter to Santa Claus. Their biggest wish? No more homeschooling. So their parents gave them a somewhat unusual bonus Christmas present.
Girls, we're off to get vaccinated, right?
Little Elisa needs some encouraging.
Why not? We already said yes to getting vaccinated. So, masks on. Let's go.
Andres Moraga and Cecilia Narbona have taken time off work to escort their daughters to one of the mobile vaccination centers in La Serena, a city in the north of the country. This one is located next to a famous lighthouse, the Faro Monumental. A PCR test center has also been set up here to detect people already infected with the coronavirus as quickly as possible. 9-year-old Matilda is the first to get her jab. But her little sister isn't at all keen on the idea. but with encouragement from her parents and the promise of an ice cream afterwards. It's all over in a couple of seconds.
We've talked about it together because it's a decision we have to make as a family. As parents, it's what we want for our children. It's about their safety. That's why we went ahead with it. Even though our little one wasn't happy, it affects the health of all of us. We all have to take care of each other, so that's why we did it.
After the jab, they wait half an hour, but both kids are doing fine. Were you nervous?
Yes.
Why?
It was the first time I got a vaccine.
Did it hurt?
No.
Do you want more children to get vaccinated?
Yes.
Why?
It's been 2 years already. We want it to finally be over.
We want them to see their relatives again. The kids haven't seen their grandparents or their uncles and aunts for a long time. Now there are finally vaccines. So from here on, we're all safe.
Currently in Chile, more than 44 million vaccine doses have been administered. Around 90% of adults have received a second dose. In early December 2021, the country also started vaccinating children as young as 3. The Undersecretary of Health says the vaccine drive is a success.
For the children themselves, an infection is often asymptomatic. But we want to prevent the virus from being transmitted to the elderly, who we already know are the most vulnerable group. At the same time, we've kept in mind that school resumes in March. So by then, we'll be able to say that this group is double vaccinated too.
The family can now go home with a renewed peace of mind. The sisters are looking forward to seeing their grandparents and their friends from school again.
Our science correspondent, Derrick Williams, has been following the progress of Chile's vaccine rollout. Though it's not yet dominant, the highly contagious Omicron variant is now on the rise in Chile too. The discovery and spread of new mutations is an additional issue of growing importance for our viewers worldwide. How does a sample analysis laboratory distinguish between variants?
Since the announcement that South African scientists had identified the new variant that the WHO has dubbed Omicron, a few people have asked how they were able to do it. So today, let's take a closer look at a absolutely groundbreaking technology that in the last 30 years or so has changed the life sciences really more than any other, genomic sequencing. Now, like living organisms, viruses carry around all of the information to make a new virus in their genetic code. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, that's a long strip of coiled RNA made up of around 30,000 chemical subunits called nucleotides. Together, they encode for the 29 proteins that are produced in an invaded cell to make more copies of SARS-CoV-2. Now, if that code changes, a process that we call mutation, it can therefore also change how the proteins are structured. What the WHO calls variants of concern are mutated versions of the virus where changes in the code have made its proteins more effective in some way. So to distinguish between variants in a lab, all you have to do is read the genetic code in the viruses in a sample. It's different and it's identifiable for every variant. Reading a genetic code sounds simple, but developing the systems to do it was not. We've only recently improved the process to a point where it can be performed quickly and accurately enough to do things like detect and track virus variants as they spread. The current generation of systems, called high throughput sequencers, they've only been available commercially for about 15 years. And detecting viral variants is just one thing they can do. The ability to detect genetic similarities and differences in species and in individuals has impacted fields from evolutionary studies to personalized medicine in really fundamental ways.
In many countries, people who want to go to restaurants, museums or crowded outdoor events have to provide proof of their COVID status via vaccination, negative test or recovery. And many countries, including Austria, Italy and Israel, have introduced COVID passports, as has Argentina. Our reporter Alejandro Rebosio took a tour of Buenos Aires to see how the system is faring.
It's summer afternoon in Buenos Aires. It's time to have fun. But now, to have fun, you need a COVID passport.
The first step on our tour takes us to a very big event, a crucial football fixture. Barraca Central is hosting Quilmes in a local playoff to decide entry into the first division. Fans are keen to share their excitement, but authorities hope they won't be spreading the virus.
Vamos Barraca Central, hoy te venimos a alentar. Esta es tu hinchada, la de Zabaleta.
What do you think of the COVID pass?
It's great. We have 3 kids at home, and of course I've had my second shot. We're all vaccinated, all of us. Barracas is vaxxed.
Argentinians suffered under one of the hardest lockdowns worldwide. The restrictions meant dramatic economic consequences for many. Now the majority of people are vaccinated, and the death rate is going down. The province of Buenos Aires requires proof of vaccination for large open-air events and indoor locations. Some fans aren't allowed into the stadium. You're being denied entry because you don't have a pass?
We've got one, but the phone battery's empty.
So now what?
She'll try turning it on again. Maybe it'll work.
But she's vaxxed?
Yeah.
This police officer tells fans they won't get in without a COVID health pass. But checks don't seem strictly enforced. Did they ask for your health pass?
No. Yes, they do.
And what do they want to see?
They don't care that much here.
But it's important?
Yes.
We continue onward to Adrogué, another suburb of Buenos Aires. We're paying a visit to a fitness center. What's the response to the COVID pass?
Good. There's always a few of them who don't want to, but when you have a word with them, they appreciate it's in everyone's interests.
What do you think of the pass to enter gyms?
It seems to be an effective setup. I'll be coming here a lot because I know that everyone is vaccinated.
Our next stop is Lomas de Zamora, on the southern outskirts of Buenos Aires. It's reportedly home to one of the best burger places in town. The employee taking our order asks to see a COVID passport. How do customers react?
It varies. Some people behave well, but others make a fuss and get very angry or even violent. They feel that their personal liberty is more important than government regulations or the general health of the country. You get all sorts. You get some people who won't comply and then leave. But some people start arguing and are nasty to me.
Once you take a seat at your table, you're allowed to remove the mask and tuck into your meal. Out on the streets in the open air, there's no mask requirement. Your thoughts on the COVID pass requirement for bars?
I'm vaccinated, and I think it's a good thing. It seems to be our only option. I feel sorry for people who don't want to get vaccinated, but I don't want to get infected by people at the next table. I've shown consideration towards them by being vaccinated myself.
The night is just beginning in Buenos Aires. Luckily, my cell phone battery hasn't run out. I need my COVID passport to visit more pubs.